Hey there, and welcome to my first Skydance video. And recently, we saw the release of the studio's first feature film on Apple TV+, Luck. Now, coming into this film, I really didn't know all that much about it. I knew that it was being made by a relatively new studio, and it seemed to have some money and backing behind it. Plus, one or two decently big names in the cast. And it was only really after I watched it that I realised what this film was supposed to be. It was the comeback story of notorious Hollywood sex pest, John Lasseter. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar or have simply lost sight of all the different creeps that were exposed during the big wave during Me Too, Lasseter was one of the founding fathers of Pixar, so to speak. He directed Toy Story and Bug's Life and Toy Story 2, and he was an executive producer for basically all their films during that golden era, plus an executive producer for Disney for over a decade, working on many of their iconic revival era films. He also produced the US dubs for Studio Ghibli, and he was a titan of the animated world. One of the all-time greats. If he hadn't been a degenerate, he would have been looked back on as the kingpin of Disney Pixar. A man who overlooked one of their greatest eras. Too bad though, he's a piece of trash. But of course, as these things always seem to go, he got a second chance with a brand new studio. And this is their first effort. And honestly, I do kind of regret watching it now with all that stuff in mind, but what's done is done. It's too late, can't take it back. But never fear. If you feel like you cannot support a company that employs a notable sex pest, you don't have to be upset or fear you're missing out, because this film, his comeback, it isn't even that good, which is a relief. You don't have to watch it. It's actually kind of bad. But for starters, we should probably go over the plot a little bit first. The story follows the character of Sam Greenfield, an 18-year-old orphan who's just aged out of her girls' home and is now expected to live independently with nobody to depend on. In fact, the only bright spot in her life is her friend/surrogate sister Hazel, who's still a little girl who's still living at the girls' home. Having started online classes for college and working a job at a local store, her life seems to be getting started, but she's plagued by bad luck. Nothing ever seems to go right for her. And as she vents about her circumstances, her bad luck, and how she wants to be able to support Hazel and help her get adopted, she meets a black cat, and after feeding him, notices that he's left behind a lucky penny. And this penny gives her one perfect day, and she intends to give it to Hazel to ensure that she gets a forever family. But of course, she accidentally flushes it down the toilet. The cat later returns, and as she vents to him, he realizes that she lost his coin, and he rages at her before fleeing, and she of course follows him, because who wouldn't follow a talking cat to find out what the hell is going on? And so she finds herself in the Land of Luck, which is split into two halves. One is Good Luck, which is ruled by a dragon CEO type character called Babe, and is also home to leprechauns and lucky cats and pigs, and cute little bunnies. And the other is the mysterious Land of Bad Luck, managed by goblins and living roots. And so the cat, or Bob as he's known, and Sam try to team up and get themselves another coin. First of all, to give Hazel some luck and get her adopted, but also to prevent Bob getting banished due to losing his coin from earlier. And after a disaster at the penny depot where the pair try to get their hands on a coin, they team up with Bob's leprechaun friend Jerry to use a drone to try and find their original coin. But of course, this fails as well. So Sam goes to the dragon to beg for a penny, and actually succeeds. But she has to give it back to the leprechauns to prevent Bob getting arrested and banished for losing his original coin from the beginning of the film. Thankful for her help, Bob then decides to assist her in switching off the bad luck temporarily so that only good luck goes out into the world, and thus Hazel will have a good weekend trip with her prospective family. Unfortunately though, this overloads the machine and cuts off all luck completely, trapping them all there, unable to interact with the human world. Luckily though, Sam remembers that the Land of Bad Luck has a secret stash of good luck, because that's pretty convenient, and thus the pair head to the Land of Bad Luck, where it's revealed that Bob is actually an unlucky black cat, and that his Scottish accent is fake, and that he really belongs in the Land of Bad Luck. But of course he'd abandoned ship when he got his paws on a coin, and thus all his friends simply thought he'd died. They then go get the good luck, they go to Babe the Dragon, they forge new stones for the randomizer, and they randomly have to talk her down from making 2 good luck stones and stopping bad luck for good, and then they fix everything and go home together as a new forever family. Oh, and Hazel gets adopted. The end. And like I said, I didn't think the film was good. And I think the world somewhat agreed. From a commercial point of view, this film was made for streaming, so we're not going to really know if it was worth it unless the studio suddenly collapses and it's revealed they've gone bankrupt. So we kind of need to depend on the critical scores. And so to Rotten Tomatoes we must go. And we'll start with the critics. It has a 48% score on Rotten Tomatoes as of writing this from professional film reviewers. And that's a pretty bad score. The majority of critics thought the film sucked. But then this is also a big contrast to the audience score, which as of my writing this, is at 73%. And I'll be honest with you, I think 48% is too harsh. I don't think the film's really all that great, but at the same time it's not terrible, and it does do some things right. I do think that we're seeing some lenses starting to be clouded because of Lasseter's reputation. And you know what? Fair enough. Nobody should need to support a sex pest, but at the same time, I do think it's probably played a role in people's perceptions. I feel like you're inclined to be far less forgiving of something that's been made by somebody you don't like at all. And so the mistakes in the film get amplified and seem worse than they actually are. And I have a feeling that that's probably what's happened here. But at the same time, I also disagree with how high that audience rating is, 73%. I know if Pixar or something pulled out a score like that, it would be considered bad. But once again, I feel like that's bias leading us astray. For me, 73% is a very good score. And it's a score that feels too high for this film. Because I'll be honest, to me this film's not good, and it doesn't suck. And so I think somewhere in the mid to late 50s would be much more fair than either of the aggregates that have been posted so far, but maybe that's just me. But I suppose I should go into why I think that's the case. And for the good, there are a couple of things to note. For one, the film looks gorgeous. The quality of the animation was high, and it was clear from the get-go that this film wasn't going to be let down by a lack of visual quality. It had a lot of money behind it. And so because of that, it needed to set itself apart from other films in different ways. And for the most part, the outer signs were promising. The visual design of the film was interesting. The concept itself was intriguing. And on the face of it, the idea is fun and unique. And this is bolstered by really good voice acting performances all round. But for me, that's where it ends. The skeleton of the film is so well developed, but that's all there is, it's a skeleton. The rest doesn't hold up to any sort of major scrutiny. For starters, whilst the story concept's good, the execution's flawed in terms of its more specific character arcs and the actual dialogue within the script. And we'll start with the arcs. They're just not interesting. They start off strong. We have an orphan struggling to make her way in the world, and a cat that's nervous he's going to get fired from his job. He's a cat with a job. That's cool. But then they sort of just pivot away from the orphan stuff, and they don't dive into her feelings of abandonment or sadness, her resentment for never finding her forever family, and the struggles that came along with being in the system most of her life. Instead, her story is about her being unlucky. And because she's unlucky, she wants to make somebody else lucky. And that's a good initial motivator, but they don't really go into too deeply why she so desperately wants to help Hazel beyond that surface level, orphan sad, happy family good. So what initially starts off looking like a really emotionally charged story arc that should interweave drama, tragedy, and maybe a sprinkling of good-natured comedy, ends up feeling very two-dimensional and underutilized. And it's the same with Bob. He's the second major character, and his arc is almost non-existent until the end when he does a character 180 and reveals a secret hidden backstory. And even that backstory is pretty generic. And if that's what you do for the second biggest character, you can imagine how shallow the arcs and characterizations for the other minor characters are. It just feels very underdone. You come away from this film having kind of enjoyed yourself, but also feeling like it did not live up to any of your expectations, that it didn't wow you at all, or really do anything other than look good and make you laugh occasionally. The story and the script are just really carried by good performances and excellent visual design. But in an era where animated films just keep getting better and better, I don't think skating along on visuals works anymore. And I think it's a shame. And I do feel a bit sorry for, the lower level creators, the animators, and all those others who are probably overworked, putting in insane hours to try and churn out this film, and then it gets released and it isn't very well received. But at the same time, I have immense satisfaction seeing that Lasseter's comeback is kind of shit. That it didn't do as well as the films he made before his disgrace, and now it's forever tied to his name. Justice. But anyway, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. If you've watched the film, what did you think? Am I being altogether too harsh on this thing, or maybe I'm not going hard enough on it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.